through some other federal policy issues. I know you're only in an exploratory phase of your campaign, whatever the hell that means. But you may soon be forced to deal with these things. And if you get 65,000 individual donors from 50 states or whatever the measurement is, you'll be on a debate stage talking about these things soon enough. A lot of Democrats are talking about Medicare for all. What's your thought on Medicare for all and what Kamala Harris recently said about getting rid of the private insurance industry as well?
So first of all, I think Medicare for all is the right way to go.
And also if you would say what you mean by that.
Yes. So look, the citizens of most developed countries enjoy universal health care, whether it is a fully nationalized or socialized system like you have in the UK, or whether it's a single-payer program like what is being proposed by most proponents of Medicare for all. So the idea that we can't have it just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, the question of how you get there is a tough and fair question, and I believe the answer has to do with what I would call a Medicare for all who want it. So basically what it means is the pathway to Medicare for all is that you take a version of Medicare, you make it available as a public option on the exchanges, and people buy in. Now, if people like me are right, that this is ultimately going to be a more efficient and preferred option, then you're going to see this lead to a single-payer environment. I will put an asterisk on this, which is that not only in single-payer countries, but even in socialized medicine countries like the UK, where I studied for a couple of years, there's still a role for the private sector. There were private clinics, private insurance. If you have copays and deductibles, there may be a private insurance market to deal with that. That's fine. But the most important thing is that Americans should not have inferior access than citizens of other countries do. And I think by the way, this is also something I think needs to be said. Single payer represents a compromise position between the right-wing position, which is a fully corporate, free-for-all. I mean, the extreme right-wing position would be no rules at all, just all corporate. Then the far-left position would be socialized medicine, like they have in the UK, which isn't bad. I don't think it's for us, but it for the most part, works for the Brits. So the compromise would be private provider, public payer. And yet this compromise position, this centrist position, has been characterized as though it's from the furthest reaches of the crazy zones of the far, far, far left. And I think that demonstrates how successful the right has been in redefining the entire playing field of the American political debate over the last 40 years.
I think Steve Ratner was making that point on Morning Joe.
For Democrats is some position somewhere on Medicare for all. Mm-hmm. Where are you on that, and how do you think about in the context of winning back these voters we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think voters I know just want to know that they can get health care, right? And Medicare for all is the right direction to move in because it represents a more efficient system. I mean, countries that do this are more efficient than we are. So it's not because we just intrinsically like the idea of this being handled by a public effort instead of by corporate America. It's that we believe it works better. It's that you would pay less on bureaucracy and more dollars would go to patient care. The reality is people say, how are you going to pay for that? How do you think you're paying for health care right now? If you're uninsured, you're paying too much. If you're insured, you're paying too much because way too much of the U.S. healthcare dollar goes into administrativia, not into patient care. Now, honestly, not all of that is fixed by Medicare for all. There are a bunch of problems in Medicare right now that are more technical that need to get sorted out, like the number of times some of these authorizations have to get touched by a human, which should be zero, but that's not the answer right now, and there's a cost to that. Now, I also think anybody in the 2020 conversation who lets the phrase Medicare for all escape their lips has a responsibility to talk about a pathway there that makes people better off along the way and not worse off. And to me, the way you come at this is what I would call Medicare for all who want it. So the idea here is you take some flavor of Medicare, you make it available to buy in on the exchange as a public option. And then if people like me are right, that this is a more efficient system, it will be preferred. I mean, it will give you better care at a lower cost. And more people will want to buy into it. So I guess it gives the corporate players one last chance to somehow come up with something better. But if they fail to do so, as I expect that they will, then what will happen is it'll be a very natural glide path to a single-payer environment. And by the way, even in a single-payer environment, there can still be a role for the private sector. I mean, just think about how actual Medicare has private supplements alongside it, right? And even even in countries like the UK that are outright nationalized, which is a step beyond, a big step beyond something like single payer. Even there's a kind of ancillary private market for healthcare. But in the end, I think we need to create that glide path, and I think it will work.
Do you worry